Hey there, welcome to my channel, The Story Thief. Thank you for being a wonderful audience and special thanks to those who contributed to make it all happen. You can find the donation link in the description of my channel, if you wish to make contribution by donating to support me to get more stories out. Well, now let's get into the story.
Milton wasn't fooling anyone. Everyone could tell that there was something that he didn't want to say. Nobody pressed him though. Celebration gradually wound down. When Cameron noticed Jessica yawning, he stood up and reached for her hand. "Let's head inside." She glanced up at him. "Huh? All right, it's getting late. Emily, you too." The three of them said goodnight and went inside. Mickey approached Milton. "We've got rooms ready for you and your companions." "Thank you, but I'm not quite ready to call it a night yet." Mickey nodded. Several of the guests stood up, said goodnight to Milton, and followed Mickey across the yard. Cameron checked the time. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. Jessica was fast asleep beside him, but he was wide awake. He could hear voices outside. He tiptoed across the room and stepped onto the balcony. Milton, Michael, and a handful of guests were still talking. Cameron floated down from the balcony and joined them. Milton looked up at him. "Cameron, what level are you at right now? You're close to the alchemy stage, aren't you?" Before Cameron could respond, Milton handed him a white gem. "This is an essence stone. I found it in the sea. It needs to absorb both seawater and cold air. If it does, then it can help you break through to the alchemy stage. It's my gift to you." Cameron smiled. "Thanks, Grandpa, but I don't need it. There are a few treasures that would help me, though. Well, just so happens that I have a few more in my storage ring. What do you need?" Milton pulled out several more items. Cameron pointed at a few 5th and 6th rank gems. "Those would help a lot. I've already got some blood from a blood clan. And if I combine it with those gems, then I can strengthen my 5 elements formation for a few days. Not even Aura's core warriors will be able to get through." Michael frowned. "Why do you need to strengthen the formation? Do you think that somebody's going to attack?" Cameron shrugged. "Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't bother to strengthen it. Nobody can get through it. But we're not under normal circumstances right now. Celestial tree changes things." He turned to Milton, who had tensed up at the mention of the tree. "Your valley is in danger, and you feel compelled to go back and fight, don't you? It will be very risky. I can't let you face that risk alone." "Cameron, the valley isn't—" One of Milton's companions burst into laughter. "Milton, you can't get anything past your grandson. You didn't even have to say anything, but he figured it out. And he has already offered to help, so you don't have to ask. But we could really use his help." Milton sighed deeply and turned to Cameron. "My friend Sigmund here is right. But you really don't need to get involved. There are already enough people mixed up in the valley's problems. Since I'm here, I can buy some time. But I came here primarily to see you and your family." Cameron smiled faintly. "So what's your plan?" "Well, just tell me. I would be happy to help." Milton beamed at him. "I'm starting to get the impression that Jessica was right about you. You do care a lot about your family." Michael was puzzled. "But what's happening in the valley, Dad? You said that there are other people involved. How many different groups are there? And why isn't the leader able to hold them off? He's an Aura's core stage cultivator, right?" Milton sighed. "It all started with the crystals." Cameron's ears perked up. "Crystals?" "A crystal vein appeared a couple of years ago, bringing with it a bitter frost. The vein shouldn't have appeared when it did. It was a couple of thousand years early. Had it stayed hidden a while longer, its crystals would have been much purer, but still, the unexpected appearance of a crystal vein caused quite a stir. There were hundreds of high-grade frost crystals, and even more medium and low-grade ones. There will be even more once the mine is fully formed. Apollo sent a group of alchemy stage elders to attack Cornelius and destroy the valley. He used his conflict with me as an excuse to send in his forces." Sigmund sneered. "The mine will take shape soon enough. When it does, the bottomless valley will need all of the help it can get. We need to start spreading the word. There are a couple of factors that we need to keep in mind. We know that there will be many more crystals, but we don't know exactly how many or how powerful they will be. Nor do we know how hard it will be to extract them. But you're right again, Sigmund. We do need to get the word out. That's why I returned earlier than I had planned to. Cameron, Please don't underestimate the risk. Everyone in the Colossus world knows how powerful you are here. But things will be different if you enter their world. They will be ready for you. You shouldn't enter the Colossus world. Cameron waved his hand dismissively. I'll be ready for them too. I can go anywhere. I'll protect your valley, and I would love to have some of those frost crystals. Milton frowned. Cameron, don't dismiss my warning so quickly. You can't go there. You're fighting against half of the Colossus world's sects. They've seen how you fight, and they know how powerful you are. But they do have ways to defeat you. Do you understand how much danger you'll be in? Cameron understood danger, but he never worried about putting himself in danger. His cultivation had made him immensely powerful and given him skills that nobody else had. The Immortality Bow had given him unique abilities, and he had his Lightning Vortex technique. It was an innate, and he knew that he would break through to the alchemy stage as soon as he entered the Colossus world. His body would undergo several changes during the breakthrough. The changes would make his body indestructible. For Cameron, those changes would be a starting point. He didn't know how much strength he would have in the Colossus world. The Colossus world was part of the Divine World. It was one of the lower worlds, but its levels were different from the levels of his own world. It was the perfect environment for him to hone his skills. Few other warriors saw the Colossus world as a training ground, but Cameron had always done things differently. He turned around and glanced at the dark house behind him. If not for Jessica and Emily, he was sure that he would already have fought his way through the Colossus world. He faced Milton again. I'll be fine. Franco started laughing. Milton sighed. It's really not funny. Franco's laughter died down, and he turned to Milton with a nostalgic look in his eyes. I was just thinking about the early days, way back when I first met Cameron. It really seemed like all he wanted to do was stay home with Jessica and Emily. I actually thought that he was kind of lazy. Lazy? I quickly figured out how wrong my initial impressions had been. Of course. On the outside, he might seem like a mild-mannered family man. But on the inside, well, you've seen how powerful he is. He grew so strong and so amazingly quickly. He took his first step into the alchemy stage, and it only took him a couple of years. He has made so much more progress than I have over the last few years. I still can't even handle a single move from him. Franco smiled a bitter smile. I confess that I feel a bit left out, Milton. The Tanager Mountain sect essentially belongs to your family. You've got the sect, and Cameron has, well, everything. He gets resources from Bartholomew, and I have to keep asking him whenever I need more. Milton stared curiously at Franco. What was that about the alchemy stage? Sigmund frowned. It's impossible to make so much progress so quickly. Keith pointed at Cameron, who was looking around at everyone expressionlessly. Nothing's impossible for him. What Franco told you is true. Milton glanced at Cameron. But how did you do it? Everyone stared at Cameron, waiting for an explanation. He pointed at the heavenly tree. The tree was the beginning. There would have been other ways, though. Some people are born into the alchemy stage. He turned back to his grandfather. I had already planned on paying a little visit to your valley. Initially, I had planned on going there to bring you back, but I would still like to go. Those frost crystals are worth a trip. The Tanager Mountain sect's cultivators had gone through so many crystals that the crystals no longer helped them as much as they once had. The cultivators' bodies weren't able to absorb quite as much energy anymore. Froststone's energy could be absorbed directly. Cameron knew that the crystals would help everyone with their cultivation, but he had another interest in them. Froststones were large, and each one held a translucent snowflake inside it. He knew that the crystals would make beautiful gifts for Jessica and Emily. Milton sighed. He was still worried, but Cameron seemed determined. Are you sure? It's such a risk. I'll be fine. As soon as I enter, I'll break through to the alchemy stage. Even so, not everyone's experience is the same. Breakthroughs happen differently for different people. I know. Some people's breakthroughs were incremental. They moved one slow step at a time into their new level. Some cultivators likened their breakthroughs to being pulled along by a gentle, slow-moving river. Other breakthroughs were more like being caught in roaring rapids. The speed of the breakthrough depended on the size of the cultivator's energy center. Milton stared fixedly at his grandson. Just pay close attention to your energy center. Michael nearly choked on his drink His face turned red and he coughed for a moment before recovering his composure. He spread his hands out in front of him. "It's fine, it's really big. Are you alright?" Milton asked. "How much have you had to drink, Michael? Do you really think that's all you need to become part of the Colossus world?" "Excuse me, sir," Franco interjected. "My energy center is only a little bit smaller than Michael's." "Not you, too," Milton responded, sounding exasperated. "You're all out of your minds to be talking about an energy center that size." "I'm about the same," another warrior added. "What's your energy center like, Milton?" "Mine is a 6-inch gold core," Milton replied. "Apollo has a 7-inch alchemy energy center that he's done quite well with as a member of the Ice Fortress. He also has access to plenty of resources. Do you have a problem with that?" Warwick stepped forward. "I can top that," she announced with her usual confidence. "I've been working with Cameron for quite a while now. He's shown me a lot of skills in how to improve my cultivation. It won't be long before both of us reach 9 inches in our energy centers." Milton held his head in his hands. "Why me?" he thought. "Why now, of all times? I just don't understand what's going on here," he observed, glancing around at the other warriors. Franco chuckled. "Warwick has a point," he said. "Cameron has taught us almost everything we know, and he's the best any of us has ever seen." "Really?" Milton replied. "Prove it." "What?" Franco asked. "If Cameron is as powerful as you say he is, he taught you all those techniques, then let's have a demonstration. If that's what you want." Franco responded with a shrug. With a mighty crash and the sound of rushing water, Franco unleashed the 4 C's technique. Each of its 4 components, the White Tiger Sea, the Azure Dragon Sea, the Crimson Hawk Sea, and the Golden Turtle Sea, swirled in the air, waiting for Franco to use them. Milton reached out to touch Franco's arm, and immediately withdrew it as if he had been burned. Milton had sensed Franco's extraordinarily high energy levels and felt the power radiating from the warrior's body. "What the hell?" he muttered. "He was telling the truth," Milton thought. Milton whirled around to face Cameron. "Tell me more about your energy center," he requested. "Maybe we should spar," Cameron replied. "I will tell you everything you need to know. I don't know if you're ready for that." Milton hesitated before beckoning his son and grandson forward. "Cameron, Michael, come with me," he said. Without warning, Milton flew 20 feet into the air before landing somewhat gracefully a few feet away. Milton wagged his fingers at Michael. "Secret sky, right?" Michael nodded. "Yes, that was the secret sky technique with a touch of the 5 elements added," he replied evenly. "Dad, you only have a 6-inch energy center, and I'm at least 7. It's not worth it to quibble over details. Let's go for a walk." Milton wanted to wipe the smug grins off all their faces. "I haven't seen my son in years, so I need to control my temper, at least for a little while," he thought. Cameron, Michael, and Milton walked through the dense forest to the backside of the mountain. "There are too many prying eyes around," Milton commented after they had been walking for a few minutes. "There are some things that we should discuss privately." He shook his head. "I still don't know exactly what's going on." "What happened out there, Michael? You're hiding something, I can tell. And where did Cameron pick up all those fighting techniques?" "Cameron should be the one to explain," Michael responded, gesturing to his son. "When I acquired the Heavenly Tree, I already had 500 years of cultivation experience." Cameron began. "What did you say?" Milton responded, flabbergasted. "Take it easy, Dad," Michael chided him. "Though I admit I had the same reaction when Cameron explained it to me. If you already had 500 years of experience, that would put you in the highest realm at the very least, wouldn't it?" Milton asked, still trying to process what Cameron had just told him. Was it a legacy from some ancestor I don't know about? "It wasn't from Colossus," Cameron clarified. "It was from the universe itself, the divine world. The highest realm is pretty weak by comparison. Have you ever heard of tribulation, Dad?" Michael asked. "Tribulation?" Milton responded as he racked his brain for mention of it. "I don't know of anything like that in the Colossus world. Our highest level warriors are all in the highest realm. Maybe the highest realm cultivators know something about it." Michael laughed. "The Colossus world has a lot to learn, Dad. What you call the highest realm isn't even close to the top level. Cameron tried not to smile. The world of cultivation has a lot more realms than you think. Each of them has early, middle, late, and peak stages. Cameron rattled off the different realms. Milton paled. I had no idea there were so many, he remarked. It makes the Colossus world look like a speck of dust by comparison. And the sects, what about them? He shook his head. Take the Dragon Star sect, for example. Milton continued. They're our closest neighbor, and they have vast holdings of land, but most folks have never traveled beyond its borders. If you're an Aurus Core cultivator, you're considered solidly mid-level, and highest realm warriors are thought of as the top experts. Forgive me, grandfather, but I have to ask, Cameron said, chuckling. Is the alchemy stage considered part of the middle tier in the Dragon Star sect? If it is, then the Colossus world is even more rural than I expected. I never thought the world could be so big. Milton murmured. Wait, he exclaimed. You mentioned tribulation a little while ago. Cameron nodded. Does that mean you possess the skills of someone at the tribulation level? The highest level of them all? He asked, still trying to wrap his head around what Cameron and Michael had been explaining to him. That's right, Cameron replied. How big is your energy center? Milton asked Cameron. Not that big, Cameron responded, gesturing with his hands. Milton muttered and kept shaking his head. I wasn't trying to keep score. I just couldn't see it clearly before. The three of them walked back, after talking for about an hour about levels, realms, and skills. Milton was still overwhelmed by it all. I feel like I have a fever or something from trying to understand all this, he said, shaking his head. So, shall we leave tomorrow? Milton asked Cameron, finally recognizing him as the group's true leader. Tomorrow night would be better. Cameron replied. He wanted a little time to work on some of his arrays, and also to give Emily and Jessica time to prepare. He also knew that Emily would pester him to come along. The next morning, Cameron took the 3 drops of the Blood Ancestors' blood essence. It had been delivered by a fearful, trembling young man who mentioned that he would rather die than fetch another dose of the essence from the Blood Ancestors. Cameron gathered up several treasures and brought them to the Thunder Sun Tree. Emily, Jessica, and Milton came over to watch him. Dad's going to strengthen the Nirvana formation, Emily explained. The strengthening process included a fireworks-like burst of color as Cameron dissolved the Blood Ancestors' essence into the treasures he had brought to the Thunder Sun Tree. Cameron's actions boosted his strength as well, even though he wasn't yet ready to break through. Even with his middle-stage alchemy strength, he was temporarily unable to break through to the next stage, though he expected to do so in the Colossus world. Although he had planned only 7 days for the trip, Cameron felt that it was enough. Marshall, I'll leave the Nirvana formation in your capable hands for the next few days, Cameron said as he turned to the nearby warrior. New Moon Mountain will be safe with me, don't you worry, Marshall replied. Dad, where are you going? Emily asked. Your grandfather, great-grandfather, and I are going to the Colossus world for a few days, Cameron told her. That's right, Milton chimed in. It shouldn't take longer than that. Emily responded, doing some quick calculations in her head. We leave today or tomorrow. I'll only miss 3 or 4 days of school, which won't be too bad. Cameron had seen this coming and was ready for it. Emmy, you can't go with us this time, Michael told her. But I promise to work with you twice as much after we get back. Emily's chin jutted out stubbornly. I want to go with Dad. The warriors who had come to watch the light show from the Nirvana formation looked at each other uncomfortably. Warwick stepped forward to try to soothe Emily. Hey Emily, we can work on some new techniques. You can surprise your father and grandfather when they get back. Emily, remember what we talked about, Jessica warned her. Emily didn't respond to any of them. She stared stubbornly at Cameron instead, waiting for her father's response. Can't say no, she thought. He just can't. You'd be missing several days of school. Cameron began. Emily nodded vigorously. I'll make it up. I won't lose my spot at the top of the class, I promise, she vowed. This isn't like the last trip, Cameron added. There are people stronger than I am in the Colossus world. I'm not afraid, Emily replied. I know you can keep me safe. Cameron put his hand on Emily's shoulder. Next time, promise you can come with us, he told her. She looked up at her father, stricken. Emily. Jessica repeated in a warning tone. Emily shrugged away from her father's touch and ran down the hill. Cameron watched, aghast. Emily had never run away from him before. Milton laid a hand on Cameron's shoulder. "She's a bright, strong girl with lots of potential," he remarked. "But you did the right thing. It's just too dangerous for her. She'll get over it," Michael added. Cameron and Jessica made their way back to the house. Emily was waiting for them inside. "Dad, I want to go with you," she insisted. She had her hat and backpack on, ready to travel. "Why can't I go?" "It's too dangerous, honey," Jessica replied. "I won't be any trouble, I promise," Emily responded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She reached into her pocket and brought out a handful of gold stars from school. "I've earned all these stars," she said. "Doesn't that deserve a reward?" Cameron sighed. "Why are you so insistent on going with your father?" Jessica asked. "So I can keep him safe," Emily replied. "If he's in danger, then I can help save him." Cameron felt like he had been hit by a truck. No one spoke right away. The emotional impact of Emily's words sank in. Cameron cleared his throat and blinked hard as he enfolded Emily into a hug. "Emmy, I promise you I'll be safe on this trip," he said roughly. "I also promise that we'll go on an adventure together very soon." Cameron hoped that this would elevate Emily out of her funk and that he would be able to leave on a good note. The embrace only seemed to upset his daughter more. Jessica watched her husband and daughter and felt her emotions wobbling as well. "I can understand how Emily wants to go with Cameron," she thought. "I want to keep him safe too." "What about my gold stars?" Emily asked. "Aren't they good for anything?" Jessica sighed at the importance her daughter placed on those gold stars from school, though she almost never showed it outwardly. Jessica sometimes wanted to accompany Cameron on his adventures. In some ways, she considered herself a more competent companion than her novice cultivator daughter. Although her energy level wasn't anything to write home about, Jessica knew a few moves and had quite a few spirit treasures tucked away to augment her skills. The only thing missing was an ability to cultivate. "Why can't I cultivate?" she thought. Frustrated anew at this fact, something Cameron danced around each time she had brought it up. Jessica was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Warwick come into the house until the woman stood right next to her. "I heard that the Christmas holidays last for a full 2 weeks for students in Emily's grade," Warwick mentioned. "By my calculations, Emily still has quite a few days left." Warwick didn't actually know that for sure, but by the time anyone realized her possible error, the matter wouldn't be able to be undone. Besides, Emily's too good of a student for it to be a real issue, she thought. That and the fact that I can't bear to see Emily crying like this. "Come on, Cameron, the Colossus world isn't as dangerous as you're making it out to be," she added. Cameron knew when he was outnumbered. All right, stop crying, Emmy," Cameron told his daughter. "Forget trading in the gold stars. I'll take you with me to the Colossus world if you promise to do exactly as I say. Don't go running off by yourself." Emily pulled back from her father's hug. "Really, Dad?" she cried. "I promise not to go off exploring. I'll do whatever you ask. Thank you." She hugged him again, that time smiling through her tears. "As long as your mother agrees to it," Cameron responded, looking over at his wife. Jessica sighed. "Suppose as long as you do as your father says," she replied. "It really is dangerous. I don't care what Warwick says." "Thanks, Mom," Emily answered. "You're the best." Michael had followed Warwick to the house, arriving just as the matter had been resolved. "I'm glad you're going with us, Emmy," he said. "I can't wait to show you everything. Wipe those tears away. You're upsetting your friends." Michael pointed out the window. Clifford, Minnie, and Ink were peering through the glass, looking concerned. Emily laughed. "Clifford looks so serious," she observed, heading for the side door. "Clifford, it's fine. I'm not upset anymore. I'm going on an adventure." Cameron took Emily and Jessica's hands and led them to the kitchen. "I'm going to make lunch for all of us," he announced. "We're leaving soon, so we need to have everything ready to go." "Absolutely," Emily responded with a grin. Her mind was already racing about the trip to the Colossus world. A few minutes later, Milton, along with Julieta, arrived at the house and heard the news from Michael. "We can't let Cameron take Emily to the Colossus world," he said empathetically. What parent in his right mind would do such a thing? It's just too dangerous. It's not our decision to make. Michael responded. But Emily is just a kid, Milton remarked. She's young, that's for sure. Michael answered. But she's my granddaughter, and I've been teaching her martial arts for a while now. Cameron's been teaching her cultivation as well. She can take care of herself better than you might think. Does anyone listen to what I say around here? Milton asked. We listen to you all the time, Dad. Julieta responded. Milton sighed. He's not serious, is he? Michael nodded. Then you need to talk him out of it. Milton insisted. I don't want anything to happen to Emily. Or any of you, for that matter. Warwick stepped forward. Don't worry, Emily will be fine, she told him. Cameron is a gifted teacher, and an even better protector. He wouldn't agree to take Emily along if he didn't think he could keep her safe. It's all taken care of, Patricia announced as she put her phone back in her pocket. I've just informed the school that Emily will be a few days late coming back from vacation. Milton looked around the room for support and found none. Dad, why don't we take a walk in the gardens? Michael asked as he laid a hand on Milton's shoulder. Might help you take your mind off things. Milton shook Michael's hand away. I don't need to clear my mind, he replied testily. I just need a little time to myself. With that, he stalked off toward his rooms, muttering about the younger generation's parenting skills. Meanwhile, the cultivators who had returned to the Colossus world shared the news of Cameron's exploits with the rest of the sect. The entire stronghold reeled at the news. What did you just say? Cameron killed how many Colossus cultivators? I don't believe it. How did you manage to escape? Aren't you worried they'll come after you? He killed Maurice. How in the world did he do that? The surviving warriors took offense when other members of the sect questioned their judgment. Could you have done any better? One asked. The lower realm warriors, which are apparently all we have around here, are at a significant disadvantage compared to Cameron and his crew. Dean did all he could by taking some celestial nectar, but even that wasn't enough. Another warrior chimed in. Cameron is invincible against lower level fighters, he said. There wasn't anything we could do. He's just too powerful. Passerby heard just enough of the conversation to halt in shock. He killed Dean? Someone asked, their voice cracking with disbelief. Even after he took the celestial nectar? It's not just Dean. Someone else added. Cameron took out several other high-ranking fighters, too. In his office, Apollo spoke with one of his assistants about the news that had been trickling in throughout the day. He was currently in charge of the lower realms, and he sought clarification that so many of his fellow fighters had fallen. Are you sure it was Cameron and not his grandfather, Divine King Lee? He asked one of his aides. Absolutely, sir, the aide replied. I wasn't expecting that. Apollo murmured as he gazed out a window, deep in thought. I've never had any issues with Divine King Lee. He continued. Hell, I thought we had a good relationship, and I've always been happy to help him any way I can. But I never expected his grandson to stir things up like this. Apollo, may I have a word? An elder had appeared at the door. Apollo gestured him in. I heard about Cameron Lee, he began. It's simply unforgivable that the grandson of Divine King Lee should do such a thing. I'm willing to go after him if you are. The elder was Eben, one of the most senior fighters in the Ice Fortress. He had broken through to the late stage of the Aura's core many years before, and was nearly at peak level. His skills and abilities rivaled Apollo's, but he knew he would need Apollo's help to take Cameron down. Hermione had suggested the idea. The problem is that he's strong enough to kill an alchemy stage cultivator. Apollo remarked, under ordinary circumstances, that should be his limit. But we're not dealing with ordinary circumstances here, are we? Eben responded. Something really needs to be done about him, Eben. Apollo stated, I hate to drag you into this. There's no need to apologize, Apollo. Eben responded, do what you have to do. All right, Apollo said, turning to his aide. Bring out the Nirvana tree. The Nirvana tree would enhance a fighter's cultivation up to the Aura stage for a brief period of time. Apollo hoped that it would be enough to defeat Cameron. The Colossus world had been turned on its ear 5 years ago, when an immense influx of warriors of all levels had taken place. Many of them hadn't survived. Lumos had been one of the lucky ones. That day, he was conferring with the rest of his sect about how to handle Cameron. "It's a good thing we weren't there for that last battle," Lumos remarked. "Otherwise, we would have been defeated like the rest of them. He's just too much for the Colossus fighters. Cameron's just as arrogant as he ever was," Jesse observed. "And I still owe him a bunch of crystals. Low-grade ones, but still. No one's interested in leading the charge against him. At least not that I've heard," Lumos added. Jesse was still thinking about the crystals. "It's been 5 years," he thought. "Maybe he's forgotten how much I owe him. Do I dare make that assumption?" Jesse gave it some more thought. "No, I really shouldn't tempt fate like that," he thought. "I'll just keep saving up." Over the past few years, Randall had advanced to one of the more senior positions in the Ice Fortress sect, and his reputation had grown accordingly. When he heard the news about Cameron, his eyes flashed with long-suppressed excitement. "Cameron, you saved my life once. I've never forgotten that," he thought. "One day I'll repay all that I owe you, but until then, I trust that you'll stay safe." Randall could still hear Cameron's last bit of advice for him before he had departed for the Colossus world. "Cultivate well. Don't forget the crystals," Cameron had said. "I've been cultivating all I can." Randall thought, "But the crystal debt has been getting bigger. I think it's over 1 million now." Darren had been working on his cultivation over the past few years too. He hadn't lost any of his remarkable skills, and only a few warriors were more technically proficient than he was. He considered himself to be far superior to Jesse, for example. This skills gap had proven quite motivating for Jesse, and he was constantly on the lookout for new tricks to learn. Privately, Jesse felt that he could easily become the king of the Colossus world one day. As for Jasper, his reputation hadn't improved all that much since his arrival in the Colossus world, and he hadn't forgotten his promise to Warwick about taking her out to dinner. He missed being around Warwick, even though she had barely been aware of his existence. He had also conveniently forgotten her blunt dismissal of his interest in her. Santos of the Dazzling Light sect and the rest of the young experts had been shocked to hear what Cameron had done to the Colossus disciples. "Oh, Cameron, you were a sight to behold in the secular world," Santos thought wistfully. 5 years ago, you chose to stay behind. We thought you would just fade away from our lives. Who expected that you would cause such a ruckus so many years later?" The fighters from the Tanager Mountain sect were the most pleased to hear the news about Cameron. For some, it was the best news they had heard in years. "Young Cameron is still as amazing as he ever was, apparently," someone said. "I'm glad he's been keeping up with his cultivation. But what does it mean for us?" Loyalties, alliances, and power struggles had grown complicated in the Colossus world in the years since the secular fighters had arrived. What will happen to the crystal mine that's almost ready to open? Good point. I've been feeling a lot of energy coming from the site recently. Several people stood atop a small peak and looked across a valley to the location of the crystal mine. Dozens more had paused to take in the pulses of energy flowing out from the mine. None of them knew exactly what might happen when Cameron returned to the Colossus world. At Bay Meadow, Jessica helped Emily pack. When they were done, Jessica stepped back and looked at Emily, trying to memorize her daughter's face to remember it while she was gone. "You're stubborn, just like me, Emmy," Jessica told her. "Don't let it get you in trouble." Jessica paused, remembering her younger, wilder days long before she had Emily or Cameron in her life. She had left her Montana home at a young age to pursue her dreams of acting and singing. She had achieved both, finding love and family along the way. "Have a good time with your father, Emmy, but be careful," she advised. "Don't get overconfident." "Who said you were in charge of this trip? You're not even going," Emily asked Jessica. "Because I'm your mother, and I care about you," Jessica replied. She was fed up with Emily's attitude. "You might be studying martial arts and learning how to cultivate, but you're not even a teenager yet. Cameron and I still have the final word about what you can do. You'll never find another daughter like me," Emily retorted with a smirk. "And you know it. Just let me go off with Dad. Right now you're acting just like him," Jessica responded, shaking her head. Cameron coughed and covered his face to hide his amusement. "Emily, show your mother some respect," Cameron said mildly. "She's the real reason we're all so powerful, you know." Emily's brow furrowed as she thought about that. "What are you talking about?" She asked Cameron. Is it the power of love or something? Not at all. Though your mother loves us both very much. Cameron replied, It's all about a person's energy center. We were talking with my grandfather recently about it. The size of a person's energy center roughly corresponds to how powerful they might one day become. Most medium to high level cultivators have energy centers about 5 or 6 inches in size. But your mother is different. You mean like 100 inches or something? Emily responded, not yet sure if she believed what her father was explaining to her. Cameron chuckled. The largest is 9 inches, so probably not. But since I've been with your mother, she's helped me increase my energy center considerably. Okay, Emily responded hesitantly. It's a huge help when it comes to fighting. Cameron continued. A larger energy center makes it easier to fight off enemies that may be ranked higher or have stronger abilities than your own. Cameron glanced over at Jessica, who regarded him skeptically. Is this some elaborate joke, Cameron? Tell us the truth. Truth, Cameron replied, feigning surprise. When have I ever lied to you? His tone grew serious. I swear I'm not making this up, he said. I've always suspected you're related to a very high-ranking warrior somehow. Possibly even royalty. Emily, we need to stay on good terms with your mother in case she ever acknowledges her heritage. Emily looked confused and glanced from one parent to the other. Cameron, don't be ridiculous, Jessica answered. You've met my family and they're not royalty. And I'm not going anywhere regardless of who I might be related to. Mom, are you really as powerful as Dad says? Emily asked. Jessica shook her head dismissively. Enough of that nonsense. I'm just your mother. Besides, if I were as talented as your father says, then why won't he let me cultivate? Look at the evidence, Jessica. Cameron commented. Minnie was the cursed ship in another form. How could an ordinary person do that? And you've definitely increased my cultivation. I wouldn't be anywhere close to as powerful as I am without your help, whether you realize it or not. I knew Mom was special, but nothing like this, Emily observed. I think we should all go on an adventure together sometime. Wouldn't that be fun? Maybe next time. Maybe, Jessica responded, still sounding unconvinced. We'll talk about it when you two get back. Emily, remember what I told you about behaving yourself on this trip? I know, Mom. I'll be good. Emily replied. Don't worry about a thing, Jessica. We'll be fine. Cameron told his wife. He was already planning his attack on the Aura Stage cultivators. I know you'll be fine, but I still want you to be careful. Jessica reminded them. Dad, you said I didn't need any of my gold stars, so I'm going to put them back on my desk upstairs. Then I'll be ready to go, Emily declared as she dashed up the stairs. I'll go with you, Jessica told her as she followed her daughter to her room. In Emily's bedroom, Jessica affixed the gold stars to the chart on the wall, where they caught the light streaming in through the window. There, Jessica remarked, all set and ready for the next school term. While they were gone, Cameron thought about how quickly Emily was growing up. Just that day, he had noticed that her voice sounded more mature. Her strong-willed nature had made itself known as well, particularly with her insistence on accompanying him to the Colossus world. That afternoon, the three of them spent time together as a family, sipping cool drinks and watching movies in between last-minute preparations. At sunset, Milton dropped by. Are you still sure you want Emily to come with us? He asked Cameron, secretly hoping that Cameron had changed his mind. Yes, she'll be perfectly safe with me. Cameron replied, I thought you'd say something like that. Milton responded, I said that too, one long ago day. He thought, and it didn't protect your grandmother. All right then, let's go, Cameron announced. Milton nodded and led the way outside, where the rest of his warriors were waiting, about 30 people in all. Cameron hadn't invited anyone other than Emily. They left at dusk, occasionally looking behind them for another glimpse of New Moon Mountain. Milton's warriors had no idea if they would ever see it again. They had no idea what kind of disturbance Cameron's return to the Colossus world would cause. Cameron waved at Jessica and the rest of his family as he and Emily passed through the gate. 7 days, he thought. I promised Jessica that we'd be back by then. I didn't expect it to take that long. Figure 5 days at the most. The portal is pretty quiet right now, Milton told them. No one has been coming through at all, but it might just be the calm before the storm. We should still be very careful. You just never know when an enemy might appear. Milton turned to Cameron. If I'm being honest, I'm a little concerned about you going back there, Cameron. After what happened the last time. Cameron nodded. He could tell that Milton had more that he wanted to say. It's like you gave the people of the Colossus world a stern warning. Milton went on. Things are different now. Apollo has been busy. There are a number of forces attacking the Bottomless Valley. Not just for the crystals there. Speaking of which, even if we gave up the crystal mine, it wouldn't make any difference. Apollo isn't going to back down. You ready for that, Cameron? Milton's warriors had overheard most of what he said, and they glanced over at Cameron, trying to gauge his reaction. Cameron thought carefully about his response. There are plenty of gems around, he answered. The crystal mine is in a critical location at the moment. It's not until they're ready to be gathered. Can't she use a Nirvana formation against the enemy? You can always wait and go back once the crystals are ready. Oh, I wish it were that simple, Cameron. Milton replied wistfully, shaking his head. The Nirvana formation is in good working order, and normally that would be enough. The problem is that the enemy has found a way around it. They also have weapons and spirit treasures of their own that make them a more powerful opponent than you might otherwise expect. I see. Cameron replied, his mind racing. You're probably expecting a Nirvana formation to be like the one at New Moon Mountain, but it's not. Milton continued. Maybe an array path could help. What kind of equipment do you have in the Bottomless Valley? Cameron asked. Maybe I can cobble something together. There are thousands of gems of all types and levels. Milton replied, and a lot of arrays. Unfortunately, the Ice Fortress has their own Nirvana formation, one they got from another sect that we haven't been able to crack yet. Milton sighed. An array path might be our only hope. I'll know more when I get there. I can look things over in person. Cameron responded. Emily kept quiet during this conversation. Even though she barely understood what her father and great-grandfather had been discussing, there are a lot of factors to consider. Milton remarked, if something doesn't happen soon, I may have to ask people to evacuate. I can't risk innocent lives. In a pocket dimension such as the Colossus world, it wasn't all that unusual for an entire sect to be wiped out. New sects sprung up fairly regularly as a result of infighting, but the overall number of sects had stayed the same for quite some time. I haven't lost a battle in at least a decade, Milton remarked. I'm one of the most powerful warriors in the Colossus world, but at least 3 peak-level Aurus Core fighters are allied with Apollo. It pains me to say I used to support his efforts, but I just can't do that anymore. Cameron nodded sympathetically. When I first arrived in the Colossus world, there was a warrior named Cornelius already there. It was at the later levels of the alchemy stage. After all this time, he's likely reached the peak stage of that realm. I've heard he's formed an alliance with Apollo, but I can't imagine he would bother himself with a squabble like this one. Milton paused thoughtfully. The only thing that might interest him enough to show himself would be for a Nirvana formation. He said, New Moon Mountain has excellent security. Cameron answered, even if this warrior came looking for a Nirvana formation, he'd never get his hands on one. Cameron had been expecting this, and it had been one reason he had taken the drops of blood essence before leaving for the Colossus world. You sound very confident, Milton commented. That's one of the things I like most about you. I like it too, Emily piped up as she gazed adoringly up at her father. The shared love between the two brought a smile to Milton's face. Dad, aren't we almost there? Emily asked eagerly. Will we go through the tunnel soon? I can't wait to see what it's like inside. The air near the portal was clear and fresh. The entire expedition picked up the pace, as curious as Emily to see what was on the other side. Can you feel the spirit energy in the air? Cameron asked. After we go through the portal, I'm going to take advantage of the energy and go into solitary cultivation for a couple of days. Maybe I should cultivate too, Emily suggested. Milton stared intently at Cameron. He hadn't expected his grandson to go into solitary cultivation so soon after crossing over into the Colossus world. And he wondered if it had anything to do with the 500 years of memories Cameron had amassed during his time in the Divine World. He kept those ideas to himself, though. If word ever got out about Cameron having another life in the Divine World, the entire Colossus world would be thrown into chaos. Colossus warriors had been searching in vain for decades for a path to the Divine World, and they might not take kindly to the fact that Cameron had spent a lot of time there. Milton gazed up at the stars that twinkled in the vast, clear sky overhead and decided that there was no time like the present. "Let's go," he announced. "Everyone, it's time to go through the portal." The Azure Dragon captain and a dozen or so of his warriors were waiting for them. When the captain saw Cameron, he strode over to greet him warmly. Before the captain could reach Cameron, one of Milton's men took a glowing gem out of his pocket and raised it into the air. With a brilliant flash of light, Cameron's entire group vanished. In a split second, the group found themselves in the middle of a forest, surrounded by birdsong and the soothing sound of rushing water. "We've arrived in the Cedar Mountains," Milton explained. "It's about a half-day's journey from the valley."
"Are there a lot of tunnels?" Emily asked. "Like there were before?"
"Sort of," Milton replied. "There are tunnels, but not like you've seen before. They don't shift around like the others did. The Colossus world is a pretty big place, so we've got lots of room for tunnels and caves."
Emily reached for her father's hand. "Where are we going next, Dad?"
she asked. "Hold on a minute," Cameron told her before he took a deep breath. "It smells exactly the same," he murmured. The Colossus world reminded both him and Emily of the area around the ruins they had visited previously, but there were subtle differences, including the energy level in the air around them. Cameron's mind keyed in on the energy, and soon he detected numerous birds, plants, and beasts for a mile in each direction. Once he got a handle on the different beings and sensations in the Colossus world, he knew where they needed to go. "This way," he said to Emily, pointing toward the east. They jumped gracefully into the air and floated just above the ground until they reached a clearing next to a waterfall. Several large boulders and trees provided a few secluded spots to camp. "This looks like a good spot," Cameron observed as he began to explore the area around the waterfall. "I'll go into solitary cultivation here for 2 or 3 days." He rummaged in his pack for some food and water. "Emily, take some snacks and water, enough for a couple of days. If you're bored, try to cultivate or listen to the birds. Just don't go wandering off." Cameron didn't really expect Emily to go off by herself, but he felt compelled to mention it regardless.
"Don't worry about me, Dad,"
Emily replied.
"I'm not going anywhere without you."
"All right, I trust you," Cameron responded. He turned to Milton. "You should rest too." Milton looked closely at Cameron. "Are you sure you want to break through in a strange place like this?" Cameron smiled. "It's as good a place as any," he replied. "I've broken through in much worse places, believe me." Cameron sat cross-legged in the shelter of one of the towering trees next to the waterfall and slowly closed his eyes. He had been working for more than 5 years to reach the first level of the Immortality Bell. It had taken an immense amount of time, money, and resources to augment his physical body. The process had nearly cost him everything during his dealings with Bartholomew, but he had finally been able to balance the resources in the treasury. At the end of the level that he was currently working on, Cameron would be able to refine his body into an immortal one. Aside from the obvious benefits, he would have access to additional attributes available only to those who had reached the second level with the Immortality Bell. Cameron didn't know a lot about those new attributes, and there was no one he could ask. The first major power that he would gain was a divine ability that would allow him to absorb energy from a variety of materials and substances to further enhance his immortal body. There were several steps involved, and the process would take a very long time to complete. Fire was quite important at this level as well. Once Cameron had formed his immortal body, he would need to absorb a great deal of fire before he could advance further. If I ever get to the point of having an immortal body, then what does that mean for me in the future? Cameron wondered, what's left to achieve after immortality? His head began to hurt as he contemplated all the implications. Several hours later, a light flashed. Cameron was growing impatient. Why can't I use the simplest way? He thought, why is there so much focus on the immortal body when I just want to use the attributes? I can't wait to reach the 3rd stage. A short time later, he began to understand things more clearly. So that's it, he realized. Still deep in solitary cultivation, people come from many different paths to reach immortality. But to reach that state, they all need to be at the same level. Just then, the Immortality Bell began to spin at a ferocious rate. Cameron felt as if he were floating, and he heard a disembodied voice, as if from a great distance. "Now!" the voice said. Cameron felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Every nerve ending in his body seemed to fire at the same time, and he had no sense of time, light, or gravity.
This was in keeping with the legends Cameron had heard about a natural phenomenon, such as lightning, appearing when a martial artist reached an extraordinary degree of talent in a particular skill. Cameron focused on his storage ring. One high-grade crystal after another flew out of the ring and settled on the ground around him until he was surrounded by more than a dozen glittering treasures. The glint of the crystals caught Emily's eye, and she gasped at their brilliance. She started toward them, but Milton held her back. "How much are those crystals worth?" she whispered. "I've never seen anything like them." "Leveling up is expensive," Milton murmured. "If my eyes aren't fooling me, that's far more than any normal warrior needs to break through to another level. Maybe Cameron's got something else in mind." "Like a formation?" Emily had heard her father talking with his grandfather about a Nirvana formation. "It's not any formation that I recognize," Milton responded. That was when Emily realized that her father was about to level up. Moments later, the others figured it out and watched Cameron with rapt attention. The treasures on the ground around Cameron glowed brighter as they transformed into pure energy that flowed into Cameron's body. A deafening thunderclap signaled that Cameron had completely absorbed the treasures, but Cameron remained in a trance-like state under the tree. A gold-tinged mirror image of Cameron appeared in front of Milton briefly before morphing into an image of a towering golden tree. "What on earth is that?" Milton marveled. He had never seen anything like it. Another thunderclap rumbled overhead, and the image of the tree burst into flames. Cameron seemed to be floating in a sea of fire. His aura flickered erratically, as if he were shifting between worlds. Fire and golden light began to swirl all around Cameron as he sat motionless under the tree. Suddenly, a blazing bright sun appeared in the sky, and it looked like it was on a collision course with the moon. A blinding light illuminated the clearing around the waterfall. Aura's stage beast skulked at the edges of the forest, drawn to Cameron's transformation but afraid to approach any closer. Milton and the others felt no danger or fear as they witnessed Cameron's breakthrough, but they all stood open-mouthed with astonishment as the flames and light crackled all around them. The chaotic light show only lasted for a few seconds before slowly dissipating. Cameron appeared motionless, but turbulent changes still whirled through his body. If he had opened his eyes at that moment, it would have been a terrifying blood red while his aura was still rebuilding itself. His energy center grew to an unheard of size, and his physical body became more imposing. The immortality bell rotated rapidly within Cameron as it put the finishing touches on Cameron's new meridians. Cameron remained still for another few hours while his body and mind adjusted to their new levels. Why didn't I get a new divine ability when I leveled up? Cameron wondered as he began to come out of his trance-like state. It's happened every other time. Shortly thereafter, he realized that his lightning vortex technique had strengthened considerably, fusing with the mighty claw and the sky demon skills to create an unusual new technique. The combined strength of the skills was significantly higher than the techniques by themselves. Not bad, Cameron thought as he started to stir. Not bad at all. "Dad, you're finally awake!" Emily cried, running over to her father. "It feels like I've been waiting forever. Did you know that you redirected the waterfall while you were out?"
Thank you for listening to A God Among Men. Please subscribe to The Story Thief to get instantly notified on new episodes. And stay tuned for more.